to another brand new episode here on Britain's Farm. As you can see, we've got the Massey Ferguson out and the Britain's 3 for a plough. And we are doing, believe it or not, a bit of ploughing. But yeah, so we've got to get this turned over just for winter. Lots of sort of jobs coming up. I want to get the obviously that's the new farm in front of us that we built in the last episode, and it's not too bad actually. The farm, and the sort of at first when I did it, it was kind of felt like it may have been a bit of a sort of anticlimax, but I've been doing a few other jobs on the map and on the farm, and I've sort of had to come by it a couple of times, and it's grown on me. Actually quite pleased with the way in the end that it's turned out. To be fair, I think it's just the right size for what we need at the moment. There is that area at the back for what is supposedly going to be, or supposed to be, for the dairy cows, but if we get to the stage where we need to expand the farm a little bit and the dairy cows don't go in there, then we've got room to expand the farm a little bit. But so the dairy cows is the plan, but we've also got that bit of land up at Richard's farm that we can also still add to if we want to. So Richard's been down and had a look and sort of said, well, there's options, because we can still get a little bit more in at my end, and and if you want to expand the farm, because obviously he's stopping his pretty much stopping, apart from a couple of fields, his arable operations, if you like, and he is now concentrating more on the animals and the grass side of things. So yeah, it leaves us with a good opportunity to kind of do sort of what we think is best to do in terms of the farm and his farm as well. So yeah, exciting times. Very pleased, as I say, in the end with how it's sort of turned out in the end. And as I say, I think once we get moved in, it will look even more homely and even better, because at the moment it's just empty sheds that look like they've kind of been randomly placed, which I guess in a way they have, but there was some planning that went behind it. It was a case of not just kind of going into the in-game sort of editor, if you will, and plonking loads of sheds down. There was a little bit of planning that went into doing it, but as I say, once we get the equipment into the sheds, and the seed bags and the fertilizer bags into their homes, and the spray tanks and everything else, then I think it will start to really look like a home for the farm. So yeah, I'm really pleased. So we've run out of money now. We've still got some bits and pieces that I want to do on the farm. So it's a case of the farm build hasn't finished yet, but I do now need money again. So we're going to be looking at, what assets do we have to sell, and what can we do to build our resources back up, because harvest at the moment is a very long way away, and I think the spring crops are going to have to be crops that we can grow just to sell, just so as I say, get some money back. And I would, now that the farm is built, I would now like to concentrate as well on just buying more land and increasing the farm size that way, because also as well, buy more land, you grow more crops, you've got more to sell. So it makes a lot of sense for me to do that, and or for us to do that. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next year or two, because it won't happen again straight away or overnight. And finally getting this straightened out. Look, and I had because I started off down in that little bit there, just where the blue thing is. You can just see the blue there. I started off there and obviously went that way. I was going to that shed and then to the farm, And when I came to go through from there all the way through, I didn't quite get it square, and it meant that I put a bit of a bend in it about roughly where the rolls were, when I realised I wasn't going to meet up to the edge of the field there. So I turned thinking, oh, I'll just move over a little bit, it won't make a big difference. But I should have known better, because ploughing was my job, and it made a massive difference. I didn't think it would make such a big difference being such a small plough, and I'm ploughing the wrong way. So that's also good. We'll start that again, shall we? Yeah, so I didn't think, as I say, it would make that much of a difference. So in there is where I started, and then as I say, I went that way, and when I levelled it off, I didn't think the turning would make such a big difference, but it did, and again, I thought that because I had a small plough on, and I didn't think 3-footers would make a huge sort of mess in just moving over, but I'm slowly getting it straightened out again. So beginning to sort of feel happier and at ease again, because I really do hate my ploughing being messy and bendy and wibbly and wobbly. So it's coming nice again. I had so as I've said before, my job mainly was ploughing and and sort of following the veg team around, and then once sort of arable land, cereal land got cleared, I would then obviously go in and excuse me, plough them too, and whatever. And as the years sort of went by, and then if it was wet and we were getting the potatoes off or the sugar beet off, I would then go in behind them and plough the land and try and level it off, and also as well because it helps with drainage a little bit. But I remember another type of plough that I used to use, which essentially is a cultivator really, but it leaves a very similar job to sort of ploughing, and it's quite a deep cultivator as well. And some of you may have heard of it, and some of you may not, of a soil saver. So it was an Opico soil saver, and our one that we had on the farm was 8 meters, and it, as I say, would obviously go on the back of my Challenger. And I was out on it one day. We tended to do soil saving if, like when the peas had been brought off, if the viners had not really left much in the way of ruts or anything like that, or the sugar beet harvesters, or sometimes even potato harvesters, where there wasn't really any ruts to level out, but there was wheelings that needed moving, but you didn't necessarily want to plough it. And it may be that it had been slightly too damp, because we would only ever subsoil if the ground was rock hard. If the ground was soft, the subsoilers didn't go into the field. It was only when the ground was rock hard that we would then go in and subsoil the land, or pan bust as we used to call it, because essentially what you're doing, the legs are going, we used to have our legs in at about 14 inches on the back of my big Challenger. I had a five leg subsoiler at 14 inches, and that's the depth that we would subsoil at, and it was really interesting to sit in my tractor, and watching the sort of earth underneath the surface, sort of lift up and sort of just break sort of slightly on top and what have you, and of course it helps with drainage, and it also helps with sort of a little bit later in the year, September, October, if it's still dry, it helps to get a bit of air in, or in the springtime if you've ploughed it and you've had a really bad wet winter and it's sort of gone hard but has sort of all squashed down, you'd run the subsoiler through it then just to break it and put the air back into the land, so that obviously the land underneath the surface of the ploughing could breathe again, and because it would also help to dry it out. But yeah, no. So one day, get to work, and it's a case of the pea viners have been overnight, and we wanted to start catching them up. Because the land that we were doing that the peas was on would always go wheat as the next crop, and what they wanted to do was soil save it and then leave it, and then soil save it again, then leave it, and then either sort of disc cultivate it or possibly even soil save it again and then drill into it. And it was a system that worked really well on our farm with the soils that we had. And so I've gone into the field with my soil saver, and the last words from my farm manager Adrian were, Terry's been using this and he's had some issues with it. And I said, okay, what issues has he had with it? And he said, it keeps dropping in a bit deeper than what he's got it. Like, he'll be going along and then suddenly it will just drop a bit deeper and it's a bit harder to pull. So just be mindful that if that happens to you. So I was like, okay, fine. So I'm going along the field. It's a big field. I think it was about 85, 86 acre the field was, and which it wasn't by no way near was it our biggest one, but it wasn't it was much bigger than a lot of our sort of smaller fields. So probably a halfway field sort of thing, about 80, 85 acres. And I was going along, and everything was going along really lovely. And Adrian had been and sort of had a look at the job and what it was doing, and said like, oh, you've got that set up perfectly. It's doing a fantastic job. I'm really pleased. It's really straight. Are you using your GPS? No, I'm not using GPS. And which for them sort of jobs, they weren't that bothered if you were or weren't. You would get, if you weren't using it and it wasn't very straight, you would get told, if you can't drive straight, then you use GPS because that's what it's there for. So I'm sort of doing freehand. Like I say, drilling and stuff like that, I would use my GPS for. And if I was on like sort of tatey planting duties or anything like that, anything like that, I would use GPS for, because you'd be stupid not to. But just when you're sort of soil saving and some ploughing, if the ploughing was out in the middle of nowhere where no roads and no one was going to see it, I would sort of do freehand ploughing, and you wouldn't really get sort of moaned at as much. You'd still get told, but not as bad. But if it was near a road and it wasn't very, you would then get seriously told. So I'm happy. But probably halfway, 3/4 through the field, having a great time, and suddenly it was going down a breed, and it got really, really heavy. Like the tractor really bogged down, and I thought, well, because the field that I was in, it was really light, but roughly in and around the area where I was, there was some real sort of heavy, tough patches, and you would sort of get one section of the field that would be really hard going, but then it would get easier and easier and easier as you went the other end of the field, and then vice versa. As you was coming back the other way, it would slowly start to get tougher and tougher and tougher. You'd hit the really bad patch, and then eventually it would sort of loosen off, and you'd be away again. So it bogged down, and I didn't really think much about it. I just sort of changed down, or did what I needed to do to sort of help the tractor along a little bit. And because being an MT 875 Challenger at 96 horsepower, I think it was, Challenger, it kind of, once I'd sort of helped it out a little bit, but it pulled it through, So I'm still going down the field, and I've now reached the lighter parts, and you can tell the lighter parts from the heavier parts, because where the soil savers turned the muck up, obviously there's hardly any clods. It's sort of quite fine, and I've bent it again. It's quite fine, and as I say, the sort of heavier parts, there's big chunks and clods and what have you. And so I was going into the light, and I thought, shouldn't be bogging down now, and I've turned around. And for the first probably 30 seconds, everything looked as it should. As I turned round and looked that very first instant, everything looked how I expected it to look. But then you get this sort of thought in your brain of something's not quite right, and I can't really put my finger on it. I'm still driving down the field, and I'm looking at the soil saver thinking something's not right, and I'm sort of, because I'm now looking backwards, I've sort of lifted my head up to look a little bit further back down the field, the heavier part, just to see like how sort of bad it was. And that's when when the realization hit me of what looked so different. I was pulling my soil saver with no axle. I'd literally pulled the axle clean off the soil saver, and I was basically burying it into the ground as I was sort of going along. And the Challenger was still, still pulling. I mean, it was dry, so I mean it helped. But the Challenger was sort of pulling it quite nicely along, and yeah, I'm burying. It's just like, oh, that's a problem. I think I better stop. And like tractor drivers, we get in routines and habits. Well, of course, I stop and then press my lift button well, the because it was on hydraulics. It weren't on the lift. It was a tow, not a trailer connection, but like the American hitch version, where it goes into and you drop the pin through, which it's not widely used in this country, that connection, but we had them on the two Challengers that I had. I mean, there was other Challengers on the farm and John Deere's and stuff like that for the other workers, because as I say, you were allowed to have, you were allowed to choose your tractor that you wanted, and yeah, but it wasn't widely used apart from the big tractors. They had them. Not the Quadtrac had them. We only had one Quadtrac, and that did just about all of the really heavy big stuff. But yeah, so my challenge is still sort of merrily pulling along, going, this is a bit harder than what it was a little while ago, and of course I'm on instinct. I need to stop. I best lift it up. Well, of course, it was on hydraulics, as I say, and the hydraulics powered the wheels and pushed the wheels down, obviously, onto the ground. So I'm pushing and couldn't for a few seconds. It's a bit like when the electric goes out and you try and pull the kettle and think, I'll have a cup of tea while the electric's out, and then you're just kind of like, well, how am I going to have a cup of tea? The electric's out. It's kind of that sort of situation, and I sort of stop and I get out and I sort of go back and I sort of think, well, how the hell am I going to marry the two back together again? It was, it kind of felt like they'd had a row, and when I gone, no, I'm not, and stayed where it was. And as I say, the soil saver was buried quite a long way into the ground by the time I'd sort of realised what was going on. And yeah, so it was a case of sort of ring the farm and sort of say, I'm going to need probably 2 service trucks, a forklift, and a flatbed trailer to get it back. And they came out, because the farm had its own sort of engineer team, if you like, or mechanic team, that they would come out and they would service us. And that was purely because, as I say, our farm was sort of spread all over Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire, into Norfolk. So it was important and imperative, really, that because we were usually always so far away from the farm, that we had a team that could get out to us sort of fairly quickly. Yeah, they came out and sort of looked at me and went, and you didn't notice? I said, well, it was pulling a bit tougher, I'll grant you that. I said, but I just assumed that I was still going through the tough bit. And they're kind of shaking their head at me and going, and you didn't notice? There's a lot like, I bet you was on your bloody phone, wouldn't you? And I was like, well, no, actually, because I don't have one of those iPhone-y clevery things. I've got one that rings and texts, and that's literally all it does. In fact, I think it was a Nokia, and the only reason why I think it was a Nokia was because I had a game Snakes on it, I think, or Snake, or Word, or I don't know, something like that. I'm not very technical and very up on me phones and stuff like that, but it was something like that. It basically, you went around and ate balls, and it got bigger and bigger and harder, and in terms of, I mean, it got longer. No, this is not a good a good description that I'm giving here, so I'll quit on that one, I think. But yeah, so I'd pulled the axle clean off, and it didn't go down too well. Not only with the engineers, but also back at the farm, because it took quite a bit of pulling to get the saw saver out of the ground. So basically, what we had to do was I drive forward really slowly. The forklift was attached at the back of the soil saver and then strapped to the frame of the soil saver, and as I was moving, it was gradually lifting the boom up and trying to sort of pull it out of the ground, but it wasn't an easy task. But yeah, so I did that, and another incident that I had was where the same happened with the depth wheel on my I think I had it wasn't my plough actually. It was a plough that I'd borrowed because the plough had subsoiler legs on it, and they wanted obviously the ground to be ploughed and subsoiled at the same time. And it was I think it was an 8 or maybe 9 for a Kvervland plough. I say it had the subsoiler legs. They had 4 subsoiler legs between, or I think it was 4 or 5 subsoiler legs between the furrows, and yeah, the depth wheel came off, and again that started to pull a bit hard. But I did sort of stop quite quickly because I was in a light land field, so it shouldn't have been getting hard. So I sort of, as soon as that started to get, so as it was pulling hard, for way longer than it should, a few seconds, over a few seconds, I stopped and sort of turned around, and it was like, ooh, yeah. So didn't didn't go down too well with Gary, because that's whose plough I was using. He was, I think they were potato planting in the spring, and that's why I was on his plough. And that, I wasn't ploughing in front of them. I was ploughing ready for veg to go in. So it could have been onions or something like that. But I was sort of ploughing, and the wheel came off. And as I say, but that wasn't such a disaster. And then another one, I was subsoiling. I was a good tractor driver, I promise you. It's just that, over the course of the years and the days that you're out in the field, things do break, and especially because we had a lot of sort of people that would come onto the farm. They'd do a few days or a few weeks if we were really busy, and they'd help us out, but they weren't necessarily that good to the equipment, or they didn't necessarily sort of take the same care of it as what we did, as much as we tried to tell them and encourage it, but they didn't. And we'd had an old bloke in, actually, Richard. Remember him well, and he was one of those old blokes that sort of us young lads, because the full-time staff, we were all quite young. They sort of recruited you young and kind of hoped that you worked all the way through to your retirement. But every time someone left, and a young person would, either from college or from wherever, and the idea behind that was that then you would have a worker for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever. So that was the thinking behind it. And this old bloke, Richard, he'd been made redundant from a farm that had gone under around us, and we'd bought pretty much all of their land, and we also agreed to take on their 3 tractor drivers as well, so that they weren't out. Well, the way they worked it was that it got made redundant, so they got their money, but it was also agreed that we would take them on, and he came in for because he was getting ready to retire, and he'd sort of come in for sort of the summer months, and he'd been on one of our older Challengers. I think we had a Challenger C. I can't remember what number it was. It probably wasn't the most powerful Challenger that we had. It's probably 350, 400 horsepower, something like that. And it would easily carry out subsoiling and sort of power harrowing and stuff like that. And he was in. He'd been on the subsoiler, and he'd gone. He'd left the farm again, and I wanted to, had sort of been told that they wanted me to go subsoiling, so I put the subsoiler on, went out into the field, and was sort of quite happily minding my own business. And when I was coming back the other way, one of my subsoiler legs was stood up perfectly, buried in the ground, stood up perfect. It literally sheared clean off, and the subsoiler frame had just gone straight over the top of it. Because it was lucky. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have. I would have known straight away, because normally we would have had a crumbler on the back of the subsoiler, but because we'd had a really, really, really hot summer, we knew we wasn't going to be bringing up any clods, or that was at least, in the land we was in, we sort of knew from experience we weren't necessarily going to need the crud, and I'd taken it off. And one of the reasons why we used to take it off was obviously less weight, less fuel, because the tractor's pulling less. And especially as I would have had to have wound it in to lift it right out of the ground so that it wasn't on the ground. So you might as well just unbolt it and take it off and leave it at the farm. And as I say, less weight, less fuel. And so that's what I'd done. So had I have had the roller on, it would have obviously have it would have stopped me, because that was, as I say, 14 inches or so down in the ground, and I wouldn't have been able to have pulled it over. So, but because I didn't have the crumbler bar on the back, and the frame of the subsoiler had just gone straight over the top of it. And say when I was coming back down the field, I saw something standing up, and I was thinking, what on earth's that? And then when I got past it, it was like, oh, that's one of my legs to my subsoiler, and it was the wing leg that had come off. Hence the reason why the frame was able to go over it. Technically, because when it's sheared off, there was no more of the frame to go over it, so it meant that it sort of broke free of the bit of frame that was on the wing, if you like, to hold it in place. And once it had sheared off, of course, that bit of the subsoiler had gone by, and there was no other part of the subsoiler apart from the crumbler, if it had been on, that would have then hit it. But yeah, so I had to ring back to the farm and try and explain that one to them. But yeah, no, but in general, honestly, I promise, I was I was very good. Well, at least I hope I was. I mean, people have said I was, so I take their word for it. But yeah, it was a funny old time. It wasn't all in the one summer, obviously. I mean, it's over as I say, the sort of spread over the years that I worked on the farm, and that different things sort of happened and what have you. But yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I look back now with fondness and humour at it. I know at the time I probably didn't, because, as I say, I sort of tried to pride myself on not breaking stuff. I tried to pride myself on the fact that, you know, I was a good, reliable driver, because it was only sort of, you know, when you went there, you didn't get on to any of the sort of what we used to call sort of big proper jobs on the farm. You do medial rubbish stuff like cleaning sheds and, you know, hoovering out grain tunnels and floors and stuff like that. You know, you had to sort of build their trust, and then once you built their trust and you showed yourself to be reliable and dependable, and that you were, you know, you were working as the, you know, the motto of the farm was you work as though it's your farm. You know, you treat it like it was your farm. And it worked very well. As I say, a lot of people that came that, you know, didn't cut it. You know, the farm just after 13 weeks, you know, sort of said no, thank you very much, or, you know, actually we don't need someone, or, you know, whatever. You know, they would find a way of not taking them on. But luckily, because I was, as I say, they saw me ploughing, or the farm manager saw me ploughing, and came over. Although I had sort of an interview of sorts. Really, it wasn't a proper interview, but an interview of sorts. I didn't have to go through the 13 weeks, because they'd already seen what I was capable of. It went down that I had to do the 13 weeks, but I was told that as long as I, you know, unless I really messed up, then, you know, I had a job at the end of it, that I wasn't to worry. Which, you know, thankfully was good, because, as I say, it's the best farm I ever worked on, and it was also, you know, a very good place to go and work. You were, you know, as workers, you know, and I've been on farms, you know, where they're helping out, or, you know, where you were treated like crap, quite frankly, and a couple of farms instantly jumped to my mind where that was the case. But yeah, there, honestly, you were treated. We were all treated brilliantly and really well looked after as well. And they appreciated in the summer that, you know, we worked long hours, and so we used to have sort of time, usually once a week, times where our families could, like, you know, like the sort of wives could bring you know, the kids up, and the kids could ride on the machinery, and, you know, obviously your wife. I mean, I had a girlfriend. I've never been married, so I had, you know, my girlfriend used to come up and sit with me, and sometimes she'd bugger off and go onto the combines if I wasn't driving a combine. I mean, I sort of used to fill in, and the same with grain cart, I used to fill in, but you know, usually I would be out either ploughing, cultivate, you know, well, I've said it all before, but I'd be out doing that sort of stuff. But as I say, when we were really busy, or if it had been really wet, you know, we may hire another 2 combines in, because we had two class Lexion 700s of our own at the time. And if it was, you know, come really wet and we were really behind, you know, we would hire in another 2 combines. And so therefore, that, you know, I would then be on a grain cart, or I may be one of the combine drivers. You know, just depended. But yeah, but good days, and you know, as I say, some disasters, but some funny disasters. They're only funny because no one got hurt, and the machinery got fixed, and you know, sort of. I think with the soil saver, I think it wasn't the next day, but I think the day after, I was back out with it and using it, and doing, actually. So I was back out using it, and as it always happens, you know, you get one, something else comes along. I actually picked up a double puncture on it the next time, so again they had to come out to me to bring 2 new tyres, but that was a fix in the field that they could do. But yeah, so I got a double puncture in it as well, straight after they put the axle back on it. I don't know why or how I'd sheared the axle off, but I had. I like I say, I sheared it clean off, and they said because it was such a clean cut off that it was really easy to repair. So that was good. Anyway, I've gone on for far too long in this episode, and as I say, it did get requested that I sort of relive some of the stories of the past of the farm, or about my life or whatever, and sort of talk rather than doing sort of time lapses in the video. So this is another one of those. I really enjoy doing these. I really hope that you all enjoy listening and obviously watching at the same time, but listening to the stories. And if you want more, just drop a comment in the comment section. If you want less, or if you don't want them, also drop a comment, and then we'll have to sort of kind of take a vote on it and then see how we go. But as I say, I do enjoy making these types of videos, and it's ideal, this sort of job, ploughing or baling, or something where I'm going to be out in the field for a little while, working. It's ideal to sort of do it, or spraying or drilling even. The sort of, on Britain's farm particularly, it lends itself perfectly for having an episode like this. But as I say, I've gone on far too long, and I'm gonna let you all get back to your life or lives, and I will see you in the next episode. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. As I've said before, by July 1st, I'm looking to hit 400 subscribers. We're well on target, and hopefully we'll get there with your help. If you haven't already subscribed, and I'm absolutely certain we can get there. And all that's left for me to say, as I always do, because I really do mean it, I've really enjoyed having your company with me on this episode, and listening to my stories, and humouring me for 38 minutes nearly. And I really look forward to having you on the next episode. Bye for now.